Pigeons 420. Mr. Grow It. And Rob from Cannabis Lifestyle TV. From the Stash Podcast.
This show is brought to you by Dutch Pro USA. Nutrients made for growers by growers. From the base nutrients to the Explode Booster. Dutch Pro USA is bringing you the essentials that all growers need without the extra bottles. Visit Dutch Pro USA or find their products on Amazon.com. Spider Farmer LED. One of the leaders in affordable quality LED lighting for growers. From the SF Quantum Board series to the SE Bar style LEDs. Spider Farmer has you covered without breaking the bank. Find Spider Farmer LEDs on Amazon.com. And AC Infinity. Innovators in the air game, providing state-of-the-art inline fans, tents, and more to the home grower. Visit ACinfinity.com or Amazon to pick up some of their products. And you could save money with any of these brands by checking out the discount codes below in the description.
What up? What up?
How you doing, brother?
Organic muscle, baby.
Pretty good, pretty good. How you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic, brother. Doing fantastic. Man, your studio is looking fly, brother.
Thank you.
You look pro as shit. You look pro as shit.
Yeah, you're looking good. I like the colors back there, man. Kind of got a little bit of ambiance. You
Little ambiance going.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, nice.
Exactly. What up?
Tim the Tap Man on the TV, I guess, in the back there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Is he live right now?
Tidbit.
Is that him
I think
live
so.
right now? I think so.
What?
Live, so it's liveception right now. Okay.
Liveception.
Okay.
That's it. That's it. So organics. We're going to be talking organics. Goblin, if you
Let's
recall, we
talk
actually had a great in-depth conversation precisely about organics. Rob, what happened to that episode?
Well, speaking of organics,
Sorry to put you on the hot seat.
Rob has gotten into organics a lot lately. And it's sometimes things are in my mind and they take my mind and other things slip my mind. And downloading the copy of the Talk with Goblin, some fucking reason, great episode. Just flip my mind again, left my mind. So many ways. Let's move forward. Let's not push on me. Okay, let's not beat me up.
Organics, Goblin, man. If there's anyone that knows his way around organics, in my opinion, it's you. If I ever had a question, if I ever needed to get something done, I'd be coming your way, man.
Thank you.
Little bit about yourself, man. When it comes to you, YouTube, and organics, how did it all happen?
Well, I started smoking at a younger age, and I realized quickly that I didn't want to keep spending money on it. So immediately I started investigating how to grow. So I started with the bottled nutrients, just like most people do. Start out with the Dynagrow and ProMix. I got a couple of harvests under my belt with that, and I realized I kept throwing away or trying to get rid of all this extra medium. You know, put it in the garden outside, put it in the backyard outside, and I just keep building it up. I'm like, for me, this isn't. I don't like how this is working out. So I fell in love with the growing, living organic, and started building my own soil.
Oh yeah, I think I remember the day you started building your soil. I brought over that fucking what was it, Grandmaster Kush, and you were explaining everything to me, and it was so complicated then because it was your very first run, and I was like, whew.
So he's trying to spill it all out at you. Everything's like,
and it was like, oh,
I figured it out, Rob. Just listen.
It's super simple. Check it out. All I did is, I'm like, ugh. And then I go back there, 9 weeks later, and I see how the plants look, and I'm like, okay, there's some science behind the madness. And then 9 years later, let's say, and it's the same fucking soil, and I'm seeing how little he's doing. I'm like, okay, now I can see where your mind was then. It's the long term. It's the marathon, baby. That's what it is.
Yep.
It's interesting to see the approach for a lot of people. Some people think there's only one way for organics. There's a lot of people who get stuck on no-till and think that's the only way to do it. And it may be the best way in their mind, but it doesn't mean it's the best way for each individual. Now, what in particular do you do for your setup, if you don't mind me asking?
I usually mix a bunch of my soil together and put it in a 30-gallon trash container. I got actually like 3 or 4 30-gallon trash containers. And once I have it mixed up and I let it sit in there for a couple of weeks, at least a couple of weeks, up to a month, then it's ready to use. And then I'll use it in my pots. I'll, grow for the veg period, and I'll maybe top dress one time during the veg period. And then during the flowering period, I might top dress like right as it is entering flowering. and then that's really about it. And I'll use that same pot a couple of times, and then I'll break the pots back all out again, and mix it back up in a tote with more amendments, and go at it again.
Oh yeah, man.
So you're just feeding in like plain water the whole time. You know,
Literally
you're
saying
top
the same
dressing the
thing.
amendments. It's just plain water. Using like RO water or tap water and like dechlorinate, or what's your water source?
My water source is tap water, and I do mostly just use water. I do have a decent filter on my tap water source. Uh, It's not an RO, but it does take out a lot of the chlorine and a little bit of the chloramines. Um, Unfortunately, with the chloramines, it's such a small atom. It's very hard to filter your chloramines out of water unless you have an RO filter. Um,
Yeah. Well, now in your setup, correct me if I'm wrong, you're using builder soil with majority of what you have for your minerals that you're adding into the soil. What is the specific mix that you do, if you don't mind giving up your secret sauce? I know you got a channel if people are watching and they don't know.
and
GreenGoblin510. Check it out.
that's kind of a hard question for me to answer because as I've leaned more and more into the living soil and organics, I don't stick to a strict regimen. I don't have a strict regimen of the exact amendments that I use because not everything's in stock always. You can't always get everything you need always if you're using the same exact stuff. So if, like, for instance, I can't get some of the Build a Soil craft blend, I'll go and I'll get some Dr. Earth tomato and herb blend, and I'll use that because it has a lot of the same things in it minus some of the rocks, basically, some of the minerals. And so I pick and choose different things that as I need them, basically. And that's what's really great about a living organic system is that once you understand the system and understand your soil in particular, uh, you can play loose with it, basically.
So for anyone that's just starting in organic, I have to admit, I've never dabbled in it. I don't think that's any surprise. And it's through sheer intimidation that I've kind of veered away from it because it just seems like it's a rabbit hole of information when it comes to organics. You know, it's there's from what I can see, there's many different levels of organics too. You know, there's someone that can be completely self-sufficient where they are providing their own compost, they've got their own worm environment, and they can convert a lot of this waste material into organic material. I think it's interesting too that as someone as skills yourself is using Build a Soil. I think it's fair to point out that the folks over at Build a Soil have done an incredible job at packaging this stuff, so you don't need to know anything. You literally just buy the ingredients, put them in, mix it up, follow the instructions, and then you can go. Would that be something you would recommend for somebody that's starting off using Build a Soil?
Oh, absolutely. Especially if you're in the Colorado area and you can get the stuff more in person without having to ship it. Or there are starting to be some of the Build a Soil like official outlets. Some of the hydro stores are starting to carry some of Build a Soil's products. Definitely go for it because they have full kits on their website and in their person store. And then also on their website under the resources, they have pretty much a PDF of exactly what you want to add, when you want to add it, how to mix the soil. They lay it out very, very particular. Like if you're just starting out and you don't know a whole lot and you just want to start growing organically and learn about it as you're growing, it's a perfect system to go for.
You're muted, or sorry, unless you're trying to wink.
A lot of people, I think, are underestimating to the simplicity of different organic methods. You know what I'm saying? You've got people like Mr. Canuck. He just does cocoa with top feeding, you know, just dry amendment. You can also mix things in, getting into worm castings and get more in depth in your process, especially when you're trying to have a soil that you're going to reuse and keep reusing. That's when you're trying to make sure you keep this alive. I think people overcomplicate it, like myself. I started to overcomplicate it and it became overwhelming. You can still keep it simple and get really good results. I mean, prime example is just using the 3.0 blend from Build a Soil. That's what I used, and it was simple as hell. Once I started going a little outside of it, it got real nasty, and I'm just like, you know, and that's where I think the dry amendments are attractive for a lot of people. When you're going to feed, you could just take a quarter cup, scoopy doop, you're good to go, But in my case, I think I had a little bit more overthinking. That was the problem. And when you're
And
just switching,
yeah,
that's I think the biggest issue is overthinking.
absolutely, especially if you're going from a bottled regimen. Not saying that it's bad or anything, but if you're going from a bottled regimen where you're used to feeding every time or every other time, and now you're in more of a living soil organic situation where you pretty much are just watering when it gets a little too dry. The only difference with the organic situation is you want to keep the soil a little more moist than you would in straight bottle grow, but you're used to doing a lot more with a bottle grow. So you're like, oh, I need to feed, I need to top dress, I need to do something. And
Totally
a
in
lot of
control.
times, yeah, a lot of times you just need to go, hey, the plant's watered, and it's looking good. We're just going to leave it alone.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about this, Rob mentioned this 3.0 blend. Is that what you just said?
Mhm.
It was a 3.0 blend?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was a premixed soil. So it's like basically grab the package, plant your plant, good to go. Now,
I'm
depending on
curious.
how you're growing, I needed to. Goblin had a great point when I first started. Is I should have just took some peat moss and planted that around my clone initially because it was coming from cocoa with mineral-based nutrients. So it kind of shocked the system when it was going into that hot of a mix. Over time, though, it was perfect. It should have leached into it and been a little bit more of a like a macro micro approach. I went in it all macro, just boom, let's go. Lesson learned.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, Buddy Love kind of asked Goblin, how do you deal with deficiencies in your plants using organics? And I kind of wanted to just build off that a little bit and include the conversation of synthetic to see the comparison. So when you're growing organic, I guess Rob kind of answered the question with the 3.0 blend. It's kind of like a bottle of nutrients in a way. Except it's a bag.
Correct.
And if you have, say, a deficiency in one, let's say it's a manganese or a magnesium or something deficiency, would it be like, actually, let's not use magnesium because we have a single bottle that has CalMag in it. So let's say you had a potassium. Yeah, right. It's one element. Let's say you had a potassium issue. Chris couldn't hold it back on that one. Say you had a potassium issue, and for me, I know that my grow series, the flowering nutrients are going to have a heavier level of potassium in it. If you're growing organic, are you adding potassium as like its own element? Are you like shaving bananas, or is it a blend?
It's a blend. The best way to describe it is that when you're using dry amendments, especially dry amendments in a living organic system, dry amendments are nothing more than other plants that have been grown, cut down, dried, and chopped up and put in a box.
Okay, so if you
and you're using those plants to feed the microorganisms in your soil, which in turn feeds your plant. So
okay, so if you
each one of these, real quick, each one of these plants bioaccumulate a different amount of nutrients. Some bioaccumulate more potassium, some bioaccumulate more nitrogen, and so on and so on. So at a flowering blend would contain dry amendments or dried plants that contain high elements of potassium, phosphorus, and lower on the nitrogen, just like it would be with a bottle. It's just we're going after plants that bioaccumulate those elements instead of mining those elements, chemically changing them a little bit and putting them in a bottle.
Okay, that answered my question. So then I guess would it be a similar technique to identify a deficiency using salt-based versus organics? Would it still?
Oh, absolutely. It's the same thing. The plant's going to react the same way. Just what you do about it is going to change.
I think the big difference that people get caught up on is like it's a slower mix, and it's your soil is really what you're focusing on, your soil and your roots, and that really is always the case when you're adding your own nutrients in as well. But in this case, it's like you have to create that synergistic blend that's going to work together. The symbiotic relationship will slowly but surely affect everything, and you can't just go and have an input immediately and have an output and think you're going to see those immediate results. But it's because the work you put in initially that can lead up to you now just having this slow roll. Like you've got this battery that you're able to have juiced long enough. When you got to repower that battery, you do something as simple as a tea or a top feed to add more juice to it, so to speak. But you got to make sure that the battery is good.
A quick way to fix it, there are highly nutritive compost teas in which you can brew and that will fix it a lot quicker than just putting a top dressing on. A lot of times, if I notice something, I'll top dress and then I'll use the compost tea to water that top dressing in. And that way, it speeds the degradation of the top dress up, as well as feeds the plant nearly immediately. Another good way in the organic sphere is Jadam fermented extracts, pretty much. They're different plants in which you can ferment down and use them as fertilizer. That takes time. It takes pre-planning because you got to ferment them for like 6 or 9 months. But once you have them, it's an immediate nutrition to your plants. It's immediately available. And when you make the ferments, you can actually burn your plants because it's that readily available.
Oh yeah.
So Dave,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I was just gonna say no, I forgot what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
Totally stoned. It works out. What I was gonna say is the thing that people get caught up on too is like that you have total control of this, and you do initially. Where I fucked up on my last run was I planted the plants way too fast. I should have just taken time, like I knew I should have, one more week, but my timing was just these clones were so big. I had to move them to another place.
Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
Hands were tied. Yep. And in that case right there, I was in total control and I fucked it up. Now, 2-3 weeks, a month later, I'm out of control. I can do what I can do, but it's not necessarily a situation where I'm going to have an immediate reaction because of all the work I did before wasn't correct. So it's like you have less control in a sense with organics down the road, but you do have more control in a sense because what you're putting your plant into, you created. So there's reasons why people will do it. And there's an argument always about flavor is better. And you can totally argue that when you have somebody who's not using a complete micro and macro nutrient line and they're just doing little this, little that. I myself have done that before using like a 3-part series. I'm like, it's good, but the flavor's not quite there, Like
and that's definitely the difference too. Is like if you're trying to get that flavor on a bottled program, you have to be you have to be on top of your bottled program.
You can't just
if you want good flavor you're going to get pretty good flavor growing in organic. Like either way, is it going to be the best? It depends on how you took care of your soil, how you made your soil, all the above, all the different variables. But you're going to get something that tastes good.
Yeah, and I think that's the argument you can't really argue too much against in that sense of inputs. I've done both now, and I see like if I slack on those nutrients when it comes to the micros and the macros, I'm not going to get the best character profile from that plant. As where when my soil is already enriched and good to go, it's going to get it. It's going to show the best characteristics. And so you got to be a lot more diligent when you're coming to bottles. Just a lot more, period.
I feel like organic, a lot of people get tripped up is they don't plan ahead. I feel like planning ahead is so key when it comes to organics, knowing when to feed, knowing when you're going to be doing your teas, like pre-planning them, right? Because it takes, 24 hours roughly to brew a tea, right? So you want to have that planned out. Some people do seed sprouted teas. So being able to plan that out as well. So I feel like a lot of people, they get tripped up and they might come across a deficiency and then they've waited too long because they didn't pre-plan. Mm-hmm. So like they kind of have their hands tied behind their back and then they're looking for something fast acting, so either it be one of those nutrient teas that are immediately available, like Goblin says, or they go back to resorting to some of these bottled nutrients that have those plant available nutrients in it, So
I think that's the biggest issue. I think that was a fucking one, because you really look at a lot of people who they just get to the point where they already fucked up and they want that quick result fix. And it's like, sorry, bud, you should have went a little bit slower. It's more meticulous with organic. It really is, but it can be simple too. You can't just buy a product and it's ready to go. I mean, there's organic bottled lines, thinking like Nectar of the Gods. So what's your thoughts on that, Goblin?
Nectar of the Gods is
where'd you go?
Boom, I'm back.
He's back.
There you
are. Nectar of the Gods is a really great line. It can be a little expensive depending on how many plants you're trying to grow. Other than that, it's a really great line, and a lot of it's all fermented kind of stuff. Like a lot of it's completely compatible with a living soil system. So if you were to trying to get one of those quick fixes, buying a Nectar of the Gods bottle might actually help you out. There's another line called Eden, and they're 100% like living soil compatible because they're all microbiology, like digested nutrients, which are completely compatible with the system. So there are quite a few, and even more and more coming out every day because a lot of people are trying to go to this regenerative farming situation. A lot of new nutrients are coming out to where they're completely compatible, immediately available because they're pre-digested by other enzymes and microbes. And the only problem right now is they're a little expensive. Like I was saying, Nectar of the Gods a little more expensive. A lot of these higher end fermented fertilizers are a little more expensive as well.
Yeah, but you get what you pay for. You know what I'm saying? Like if you want those results and you want to be able to get something like that, well, it's not going to be cheap. It's a quality ass line that you're going to spend that money for. It's similar with people who have like a veganic line. It's like, well, things got to be derived differently, and it's going to cost more to get this done. And also the demand's going to be there. So supply and demand is just what it is. So I think the more people realize that you can do things on your own, like you're doing and pivoting, where you can't get this here, so you get this here. You're going to find a product that's going to fit your garden because you know what you're putting in your plants. So it's a key thing to do. Not just if you're just bottling, it's a little tough because you're like, well, they don't have my bottle. What do I use?
I think it's also unfair to. I wanted to pivot in another direction, but I'll touch on this first in terms of I think it's fair to take into consideration when you're growing organic. There's typically a reason for that. You know, you're either trying to be better on the environment. You're trying to grow really great herb without, say, receiving, using items that are readily available. But some of the most harshest impacts to the environment are folks that are shipping dirt across the world. Peat moss,
absolutely.
Even
really anything
and stuff. Any medias, cocoa, even.
Right. When you're getting this stuff from British Columbia or the East Mount, whatever.
The amount of plastic in these bottles that's being thrown away too afterwards is and don't get me wrong, I use bottled nutrients. I do, but I've grown organic and I like both. But I don't have a large garden that I'm throwing away a bunch of bottles. I buy a gallon at a time. But like you can't look past the environmental impact on this too. It's not just like, oh, well, I want clean bud. It's like, well, there's not a whole lot of evidence that your mineral grown nutrients are going to be bad or mineral nutrients going to be bad.
But we're also tearing apart forests and jungles and for dirt to ship it across the world. You know what I mean? Like that's just not, that's not feasible.
It isn't feasible. And that's why, like, even when I brought up Build the Soil, if you can get it locally, get it from them. Absolutely. Because now you're not shipping it. And that takes a lot of the carbon, costs out of getting that soil. But if you can make everything yourself, and that's what I try to aim to teach people to do, is if you can make nearly everything yourself, might have to buy some things here and there. You're going to save money, and you're going to save the carbon footprint of trying to ship all these goods across the world for you to grow some either food or medicine.
Right.
Okay. And that's kind of where we get into the different levels of organic, right? So we talked about how it could be so simple as to just buying a blend of organics. Maybe you have a blend that you feed during the vegetation stage and a different blend that you feed for the flowering stage. You can just do the top dressing, like we mentioned before, and maybe add in microbes, right, to keep that biology alive down in the soil, breaking down those nutrients, making them available for the plant. But there are different levels that you could do on top of that. And that's where we get into level 2, maybe you're adding in cover crops, right? Cover crops that actually fix nitrogen from the air or have some sort of companion planting that helps the plant in some way. Mulch layers, another thing that helps with water retention down in the soil. That's like another level of organics. Beneficial insects, worms, those things can be added. We talk about like avocado tech and KNF, regenerative gardening, composting your own. Like there's different levels of it.
Yeah.
And I guess the final level, in Goblin, you can jump in on this, would be where you're basically, as a home grower, you're making your own compost, and that's all you're feeding your plant. right? So you know, all your eggshells, your banana peels, all that stuff is in a compost bin or a worm bin, vermicompost, whatever you want to do. And then you're actually taking that and top dressing, so you don't even have to buy nutrients at all anymore. You know what I mean? So you've got that closed loop happening.
That is the main goal, is to have a closed loop system, and between having a compost pile, a worm bin, and if you are near public land in which you can go and harvest different weeds and different things like that from nature, you have all your nutrients right there. You don't have to buy anything.
Well, let me massage your mind with a little bit of this. What about outside, all natural light and rain gather? You're gathering the rain, like 100% off the grid grow, where it's like you've created every aspect of it and there's no cost. You literally would have no cost at that point. I think that's next level Grandmaster Super Pimp shit right there. If you can
Still
get to
gotta-
that point,
Still got to get your seeds. So there's
still got to
cost.
get
You still
your
got
seeds, but
genetics.
what if
clones.
eating your own genetics?
Right, you're getting there. You could definitely get to a system where it's self-sustainable. Like one of the biggest issues, I tried to do the compost and the worm bin, but the biggest issue, and I know we talked about this the last time, but that conversation's gone.
That conversation doesn't exist.
So I want to touch on it again. My biggest, and it was answered before, but I'm going to play dumb. My biggest issue to growing organics was the concern of bugs. I have this preconceived notion in my head that when you are growing organic, you are growing bugs, you're growing microbes, you're growing all kinds of things that whether your eye can see it or not, they're present. Now, ignorance, sure, but we'll move on. When I tried to do my own compost bin, I live in an area where it's winter 8 months of the year. You know, it's minus 10, 15, 20 degrees Canadian most of the year. And then, you know, I tried to do a worm bin, and those nasty bugs, those little red bugs and those little flies and things, they were nasty. And I had to keep that in my house. I had a worm bin and a compost bin in my house. Yeah, fuck that shit was exactly what happened. I went right outside and I was like, let's try an experiment. Let's see how cold worms can survive a Canadian winter. They didn't. They froze almost immediately. But I said, no, thank you. No, thank you. So can you kind of like maybe ease my mind when it comes to organics and bugs? Is there any legitimacy to thinking that organics includes more bugs?
I'll say there's a slight legitimacy there, because you have the chance that you can include more bugs if the systems aren't balanced. If your soil that you built is balanced and it has a lot of the organisms that we were talking about, springtails, microarthropods, all the different microbes and stuff, you shouldn't have an issue with, like, let's say, fungus gnats or any other bug, soil dwelling bug that's not good for your plant. Same with the worm bin. If you have a worm bin and you happen to be overfeeding it a little bit, you might get some bugs that you don't want, some flies, some gnats, some mites that are inside your worm bin that aren't good for your worms.
Yuck.
Yuck. Yeah, you read my mind.
It also is yuck.
It was trying to convince the wife that, oh, babe, I can do this. I've been watching Green Goblin. It was a little earlier than that. But I was like, I can do this. But when you're opening up that bin and all these fucking fruit flies are going everywhere, it's like, oh, that's normal, babe. That's normal. These flies are supposed to be here.
Now, granted, that doesn't really harm the worm castings or the worms.
It harmed the relationship I had with my wife. Yeah.
Like, if he was at the couch for 2 weeks, fucked up, man.
Sleeping with the flies. So you've been there.
Sleeping with the flies. Oh, yeah. Why do you think I got a condo now? So that's what it is, man.
The best option to do compost, especially for people in the winter places or in small like apartments and stuff, is to do the bokashi.
Oh.
And can you touch on that real quick?
Lay it on me.
Bokashi,
the Japanese.
Yeah, it is a Japanese technique.
Oh, I know.
That sounds.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's a technique in which you eat pretty much any of your food waste, the greens, even some meats and fish, pretty much everything you can put in a bucket, and then you cover with it's either rice bran or vermiculite that's been pre-inoculated with a bunch of microorganisms. And so every time you put stuff in the bucket, you put a little bit of the rice bran or vermiculite covered in that bucket, and you just close the bucket. It doesn't need airflow. It doesn't need anything. And you just keep doing that. And over time, all that stuff's going to break down, and you can then add that to your worm bin, and they'll process it, and there'll be like no smell, there'll be no flies because it's already been pre-broke down. And then you can use your worm castings as food for your plants and whatnot.
Fuck yeah.
Man, thank you.
Deep,
thank you, man.
Awesome.
This helped as much as the last time to
This
really
was
break
more,
these
honestly,
down.
to be honest with you.
Yeah. This really broke things down from a beginning to an end. Goblin, thank you very much. Where can people find you if they want to come get some information?
GreenGoblin510 on YouTube. GreenGoblin510, I think, on pretty much
Everywhere.
every social platform, Instagram,
your website?
Twitter, website, Twitch.
Hell yeah,
just
man.